Sei gegrüßt, meine pelzigen Brüder. You read the title. You saw the thumbnail. So don't pretend you don't understand why the intro's in German. Anyway, on with the subject matter of the day. If you've traveled around certain high-density sectors of the internet, you'll no doubt have noticed that many intellectually deficient people, a depressingly large number of whom are in positions of power, have somehow acquired the notion that tight-fisted structure of top-down governance is a preferable system alternative to a free and open one. And if you know anything whatsoever about human history and the way these autocratic systems always turn out in the end, you may well wonder to yourself, how can so many of the people most besotted with education be so terminally deranged? The answer, believe it or not, is actually quite simple, for it's the same reason that drives people to join cults, prompts religious fundamentalism, and compels the normie populace to partake in the current most pop-cultural zeitgeist. Put most artfully by the Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca, religion is regarded by the masses as true, by the wise as false, and by the rulers as useful. I've made other videos breaking open the first two parts of that sentence that will be linked below for your learning pleasure. But it is the third portion I want to unpack right here and now, for it has nested within it four fundamental fallacies, false premises constructed of errors, that precede every authoritarian construct, from the furthest ancient to the very most modern. As I myself have named them, they rank in order of importance like so: the evil king fallacy, the one best way fallacy, the better men fallacy, and the simple motor empire fallacy. In the future, I might do more videos where I undress each of the above in fuller detail, but for the time being, here's a quick synopsis of them in that same order. There's a common trope in mythology, religion, folklore, and modern fantasy alike, wherein a singular dark overlord presides over everything wrong with the world, and the only way to put the world back to rights is for a good king to emerge. Whether born by fate or chance, or chosen by some mythical relic, or produced wholesale by an act of divine intervention, do battle with, depose, and take the place of the evil king. The reason this is a fallacy is not because evil kings don't exist. You need only turn to just about any page of any history book to prove otherwise. No, its presumptive flaw lies in our thinking that there's a good king out there to replace the evil one with. It is popular purely because, as I said in my Why Your Religion Won't Save Your Culture video, people are simple, and simple minds want simple solutions to complex problems. The problem, of course, is when you try to cram a complex thing into an overly simplistic mold where it doesn't fit, you're invariably going to break something. But so long as that doesn't happen within the immediate future, the average nearsighted monkey will generally feel no motivation to care if they can even fathom the idea at all. Next up, everyone knows the John Acton quote, "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." But this is a gross misconception of the human psyche, born of the same 19th century hubris that birthed our manifest destiny here in the States and inspired Karl Marx's infamous manifesto. This idea that humankind is innately good, and that it is only by a perverting force of external malevolence that we are made to do evil, is not but an arrogant, elitist conceit at its most infantile. Power does not corrupt, it enables. The devil only deals with willing subjects, says the other famous proverb. The acquisition of strength to force one's way, to enforce your own will, to suppose your own ego over the natural, gives the illusion of grandeur. But in reality, it only is a form of permission, the freedom to do as you will while delaying or delegating, but not fully eliminating the consequences. And it is that same bull-headed elitist view that gives us our next fallacy, the myth of the one best way. Or, as most of you will more likely have heard it said, the greater good. This absurd notion that there is a shoe that will simultaneously fit every size foot while still remaining a piece of robust and effective footwear. The reason I call this the one best way and not the greater good fallacy is because the latter only implies that certain methods for governance are better than others, which is objectively true, whereas the former implies that there is a theoretical perfect method for governing that, if everyone simply followed, would instantly cure any and all of our social ills. This is delusional fiction invented by and for fools in order to facilitate, rationalize, and/or justify their cynical power grabs and abdication of personal responsibility. Third, the Better Men fallacy refers to what Thomas Sowell was driving at in his book, Vision of the Anointed. It is the idea that a higher class of intellectually enlightened elites should preside over the affairs of the uncultured masses. The trick to unwinding this particular fallacy is that it cloaks itself in the idea that people, by and large, are stupid, which in and of itself is not only not a fallacy, but should be self-evident to anyone whose skull has not been filled with wet cement. No, the fallacy here lies in the assumption that the socio-economic elites are any better in that regard than the rest of us, and that they, therefore, by right of said superiority, should have complete and final say over any and all societal operations, from the broadest macro to the narrowest micro scale. To assume that social status and economic standing automatically equate to intelligence, wisdom, or even competence, while not being utterly without merit in all fairness, almost always has more to do with the autocentric bias of the speaker than it does with any sort of empirical analysis. It seems to me that, given how adaptability to hardship is what most promotes growth, both in society and in nature, that growth always engenders complexity, and that complexity opens up new avenues for future growth. An authoritarian despot who has never needed to adapt to or overcome any significant challenges will naturally be the simplest, crudest, least tempered, and generally least sophisticated person in any room, i.e., the fallacy of the one best way, meaning the authoritarian's way, is that systems always rise up from the bottom, but always begin collapsing from the top, not the other way around as the autocrats pretend. Last, we come to the fallacious idea that authoritarian regimes are more efficient and thus are preferable to the unpredictable and cumbersome quagmires of democracies and republics, that they, like a simple machine, have fewer moving parts, and so are more predictable and thus represent safer avenues for investment and more reliable, in the same way, and for the same reason, that a simple wheel is more dependable than a complex clock. But this, again, is a delusion. To understand why, you need only ask and answer why we don't use bicycle wheels to tell time. It is because no two measurements would ever align, as they would depend utterly on whoever was pedaling, and therefore no objective truth could be gleaned from it. But then that's the real point of autocracy, not to bring true, meaningful benefit to the world, not to solve problems, but to profit off them. This is true whether they're capitalist, communist, dynastic, theocratic, monarchist, or any sort of chimeran blend of the above. For this reason, in reality, authoritarian states are always far less efficient than their more free-form neighbors, for they must devote an equivalent or greater amount of their energy towards policing their own populace as actually developing their productive elements. Combine this with the arbitrary nature of dictators, making and enforcing laws based upon their own individual whims and their power-tripping cronies, and you have a system that is the governmental equivalent of a gorilla wielding a shotgun, i.e., all the egotistical, emotional volatility of a petulant child paired with all the unstable power of a nuclear warhead. In summary, authoritarianism exists and will always be championed for no other reason than to enrich the authoritarians at the expense of the greater whole. It works by squeezing the whole complex arrangement of the society into the narrow and self-obsessed, ego-driven mold of its director, inevitably resulting in the long-term devastation of both. But I'm sure you didn't need me to tell you any of that. At the end of the day, the real dilemma staring at us like a loaded gun barrel is this. How do we engineer a society with the productive potential of a free-range open market without making its routine maintenance dependent on getting a majority of simpletons to see reason? The short and unfortunately simple answer is, I don't think we can. However, I don't need to know the answer to see that autocracy is, was, and will always be incorrect. No matter what excuses they make, whatever pretty stories they tell you about seeking to ensure justice, better humanity, save the planet, or serve God, the end goal of all authoritarians is to veil their egotistical war against all forms of meaningful advancement they themselves can't directly profit from. So on that final note, just remember, anyone who's selling you a dream is just trying to put you to sleep. Until next time, geh hinaus und gedeihe.